My name is Joan Forrest Mage, and this is Life Force Arts Ensemble. And we are a company of visual, literary, and performing artists based in the Life Force Arts method. And we do transformation through the arts and shamanic art, spiritual art. And I have with me today Sharon Bechtold, who has been with us for so many years. It's great. And we're going to talk about the state of the world and how art affects it, and the importance of art, and a little bit about our backgrounds. So Sharon, do you want to start off and say a little bit about yourself?
Oh my gosh. What can I say? What can I say? I'm an accidental shaman, I guess, is probably the best way. I'm probably the last person who would be a shaman as a suburban housewife and computer programmer into technology and all of that stuff. And here I am as a shaman. It came through my art, actually, because I am an artist. I consider myself a shamanic artist because it is art that has healed me and helped me move through depression and suicide, and still helps me to make sense of the world around me. I came to Life Force to try and figure out what the heck was going on with my art, why I was receiving what I was receiving through it, and have grown with you and the help of everyone at Life Force. I don't really know what else to say other than I'm learning as I go through and exploring as I go through. I'm not sure this journey will ever end, and I'm okay with that.
Right. And how long have you been an artist?
My whole life. I'm a third generation artist, so I was brought up in it. Professionally, I would say probably since about 1986. 85, 86 is when I started teaching and selling my art actively. So I would say that's probably when I started writing and teaching and traveling around as a teacher in 2008. So I've written for magazines and I've written books, and all of that other stuff that I guess makes you a professional. So pretty much my whole life.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a part of my life. It's part of what I am.
Yes. Yeah. And you have been associated with Life Force pretty much from the beginning.
Yes.
We opened in 2008. But that is, of course, based on prior 20 years of me doing the work of performance and the more of the performing arts of singing and dancing, which is like my background. And then in these last 12 years, I've gotten more into producing and curating the exhibits. So adding in the visual component and also the literary component, which we will talk with Apollo Chapa, and also yourself too, having written, some of the scripts for our performances that we do. So it's a complete, what Life Force Arts Ensemble has grown into. It originally started off, the company in 1988, I called Sentience. And now that word is part of what I call the Life Force Arts wheel, which is like the medicine wheel that we work with. I want to pause for a moment and just address the topic of why would we call ourselves, like, say, shamanic practitioners? Because a lot of people, that has a lot of different meanings for different people. To me, the work that I do is based in the arts. That's the tradition that I come from. So I don't come from, like, say, a particular indigenous tradition or something. Also, the word shaman is actually from Siberia. It's not just only Native American spirituality. It's was coined by a professor of religion called Mircea Eliade, who was studying the Tungus people, and described some of the practices that they had, and then said, well, really, these practices are done universally throughout the world. And so then it started kind of more in academic circles to be called shamanism. no matter what culture it was from. But I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people that would really take issue with calling, different people have different definitions of shaman. The way that I describe it very simply to people is I work with energy and I work with spirit guides. And also looking at the history of these kind of practices, to me, if I would call it anything other than that, it's not quite what it is. And so that's why that is the sense in which I call what I do shamanic. Yeah. So I think that you feel also similar and maybe a little bit influenced by me, because I know that like you had started a lot of, can you tell people how you decided to come to me like for shamanic training?
Well, it was interesting because I would do my art and I was selling my art, and people would ask me about the symbolic meaning of what I was creating. And I didn't really realize that there was symbolic meaning to it. Mm-hmm. I just knew that it was something that was flowing through me, and I was just creating it because I love beautiful things. I created beautiful things, but people were telling me, where did you get that image? Because I saw that in a dream. And I'm like, oh, I didn't get it anywhere. It just came, and I, created it. And it's just part of my artistic expression. After that happened a number of times, I realized I really needed to look further into this, because I started getting kind of spooked about it, because I thought, well, this is kind of eerie and strange. And that's when I started reaching out to people who were, at that point in time, I was doing a lot of animals. So it was the animal spirit guide thing. So I started reaching out to people who were doing animal spirit guides, and reached out to a few shamans in the area here in Chicago, and I was directed to you. And then I came in and showed you my artwork, and you said, oh, these are portraits of spirit guides. And when you said that, I realized, yeah, actually it is. It just resonated. And one thing led to another. I took a class with you. It resonated. And as you know, it took me I'm probably your longest student, because I would take classes and I'd back away and I'd say, this is not for me. And then I'd come back a year later. And little by little, I said, okay, I think this is what I have to do, because it will not go away, and spirit is calling me, and this is what I have to do. This is my path. So I'm a very resistant shaman, very resistant. So I don't know what that says about me, other than I'm very critical and very cynical, and I'm thinking maybe that's a good thing.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I think it's better to be that way than like, oh, I've had this dream and I've had this, vision, and, it's like, get grounded. Okay. And that kind of stuff, which in a lot of ways, also, before I forget, I would like to invite you to maybe show some of your art if you have some of it around.
Yeah, actually, I've got a few pieces that I'm working on right now. I'll share what they are. I'm a pyrographer, so I paint with fire. These are just a few pieces that I'm working on. I don't have color added, but here's one. And here's a couple of others. This is one that I'm working on right now.
This is your homage to, how do you say the person's name?
Alphonse Mucha. I'd taken a step back from creating my own work, just because I really wanted to connect. I've always been influenced by Alphonse Mucha and the arts and crafts movement. I think it's very pertinent to what's happening right now. Instead of creating all my own stuff, which I've done throughout most of my life, I really wanted to dive into his mind. I wanted to really experience and feel the movement of his pieces that are so lush and so sensuous and so beautiful, that I felt that was what I needed right now. And even then, I still tweak these pieces myself to reflect a little bit more. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at these backgrounds and seeing circuitry instead of leaves, which I think is a little bit more pertinent to what we have, and seeing like printed circuits as the backgrounds. But anyway, I really felt it was something I needed to do for myself, more than commercially, to revisit that, because his work was really what inspired me to create art. If you look at some of my earliest artwork, my father had a lot of Mucha in the house when I grew up, and I learned to draw by copying Mucha's work. So I wanted to really dive into that as an adult and as an experienced artist, to really see what is he telling me? What is Mucha saying in this artwork? Why is this artwork so powerful? So, and I think that's, for me, it is so healing, and such a deep sense of beauty, and beauty in a powerful way. Not beauty as trivial, but beauty as deep as a rose. I mean, and roses are unbelievably sensuous and beautiful. They're also very thorny, very dangerous. I have rose bushes. I gotta be really careful when I'm cleaning those up. And I know that in the dreams that I've had recently, it's like beauty is a weapon, and a very powerful weapon. And I'm trying to investigate, what does that mean? What does it mean to use beauty as a weapon? Because I know as an artist, I've been trivialized in the past by galleries that have told me your work is too beautiful. And yet when I make work that's edgier, or what people expect, it's not as powerful. And it doesn't flow, and it doesn't have that resonance. So I'm trying to explore, what does that mean? And I know our conversation this morning on the phone, that I had a dream, and it just keeps going in my mind, saying, this is the time when artists are most needed. And we need to really rise up. We've been marginalized. We have been pushed aside. We've been told we're irrelevant. We've been told we're too pretty. Like my art has been told it's too pretty. This is the time when we really need to step up, because the world needs us more than ever to reflect and to dream the world into existence, because that is exactly what we do as artists. We dream the world into existence. And it's time for us to begin to create that new world. And I'm not talking rainbows and unicorns either. I'm talking about all facets of it. Now, my tool is beauty, but that's not everybody's tool. And that doesn't mean everybody should be doing that. Some people need to reflect what's happening artistically, and to give it voice, and to give it form, and to take all that chaos and create something cohesive out of it. Now, whether it's graffiti art, whether it's music, whatever it is, that's really what we're being called to. And that's us as independent artists, as professional independent artists, that have that ability to express and have the skills to express. There's a lot of us who've gone to school, we've trained. We know what we're doing. Dancers give movement because we have the skills and the abilities to do that. So,
yeah. And, of course, the whole scene, I mean, this is throughout the world, but especially in Chicago, getting emails from the Illinois Arts Council and that kind of thing, like our whole live performance, scene has been shut down since March, and there's a virus and like all of this kind of stuff, but there's also, the other side of being human is, not you interact with people and you go out and you live performance is different. I mean, one of the reasons I'm starting this podcast series is to get the word out, as however we can, and, make art by any means necessary, like that kind of thing. But, and also, as I mentioned at the beginning, Life Force Arts Method, which is something that I discovered or was inspired or downloaded from the universe, about 35 years ago, starting about 1985, is how the arts relate to the skills of being human. So, the Life Force Arts Method is sentience, osmosis, dialogue, crystallizing. So it's a whole pathway of levels of consciousness that people have and understanding the energy field. So like sentience is knowing what you think and feel, being alive, feeling, and conscious. Being able to perceive and express, right? And then osmosis is leading and following, knowing how to, like, one person listens and the other person talks, and then that person talks and the other person listens. Like on a very simplistic level, it's taking turns, and it's also understanding active listening. It's understanding how to learn from people, like you're saying, Mucha. You are now imitating him, and then learning at something that otherwise you don't maybe naturally do yourself. And so at various times we need to just do, like sentience, just like, what am I getting? What is bubbling up from within me? It's like streaming this energy. But there's also osmosis, which is learning from a more external source. And then the third of the big quadrants of the Life Force Arts method is dialogue, which means in that system, it means to interact creatively. So it's not about one person, saying something and the other person listens, but it's having a conversation, going back and forth, building on what the person just said, right? And then the last part is crystallizing, which is moving with a common form and energy. In other words, anything that is a set, choreographed, written, pre-written piece that, like, say, everybody does. So when you think of a symphony, that's like a symphony orchestra playing a symphony, that would be like a crystallized form. There's millions of kinds of crystallized forms. The fact of, putting artwork on a canvas or on a piece of wood is a crystallized form. And in some ways, bringing anything into being is we are crystallizing it into the energy of the universe into a crystallized form. Yeah. So there's lots that can be said about that. But yeah, that is, what does it mean to be human? And also, what does it mean to be a youth, and what does it mean to be an adult? These are some of the things that, we're really talking about, with the Life Force Arts method. Yeah. But we also were talking about how, like the commercial media has really co-opted the individual expression of art. And, when you're talking about artists are marginalized, it's like they're very well rewarded if they're saying what the corporations want them to say or do or create. Do you want to share the thing that you had told me earlier? I'm not sure if
about my son?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with my 17-year-old yesterday. And we were talking about everything that's happening. And I said, we're giving a lot of attention to the chaos right now. And it is real, and, it does need to be brought up. But there's always another side to that. We are living in very interesting times. I was telling him, this is a very interesting time. And 100 years, 200 years from now, people will look back at this time and say, look at what change it brought about. Because anytime there's stuff going on like this, you see dramatic changes. I mean, you can look past history. It's going to change somehow. We may not see it, but it will change. So I told him, I said, instead of only focusing on this, let's look beyond that. And that's, of course, what I was talking about with art, that, writers write about the future, musicians create music about that, dancers dance it, artists create it. We plant all those little seeds. And I told him, what would the world look like after all this has happened? What will we learn from that? And he told me, he said, nothing is going to change. So, well, why would you say that? Because people will always think this way. Well, why? Because it is what it is. He goes, most people agree with the fact that there's inequality, this and that. He said, but there's all those few that don't. And they're the ones who have the power. I said, well, why do they have the power? And it was this very interesting conversation. And it really made me very sad to think that My son is a very intelligent, very open-minded person. I have a great deal of respect for him. But to see that attitude, it was very sad for me to see that my son does not see a future without this type of violence, without this type of manipulation. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So just for reference, we're living in the Chicago area, and there was the COVID-19 pandemic and stay-at-home order, and now there was the terrible incident with George Floyd that has sparked a lot of protests. And also, I want to separate protesters from looters.
Yes.
Right? Protesters from people who are looting and vandalizing. I do not think that they're the same people.
No, absolutely not.
So what is it that your son was saying he didn't see a change in?
He doesn't see that things will change. He doesn't see that there is a way to change the racism, to change the hate. And that, it's very disappointing to me. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's his fault. I mean, I don't know. It leaves me speechless to say, well, words aren't going to change that. Words aren't going to change how he feels. Mm-hmm. What can I do, and what do I have at my disposal to make that difference? And the only thing I have at my disposal is my art. Mm-hmm. It really is all. But maybe that's more than enough. Art's been around since humans began. There's a reason for it, right?
Right. Well, I mean, what does he think about, the fact that basically for decades, people have lived peacefully in integrated neighborhoods?
I don't know.
I mean, it's like, we know for sure that, I mean, you look at other countries and, like places like Bosnia and stuff like that, there's the faction that created all the problems in the 1990s, mm-hmm. but basically Muslims and Christians have lived peacefully there for years, for centuries, so it has absolutely been proven over and over and over and over that people can live peacefully together who have like different beliefs and races, right. And, all of this kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, it becomes, how do we see that?
Yes.
And just keep bringing that up over and over and over.
Right.
Yeah. It also has to do with empowerment. Mm-hmm. It has to do with feeling like you're not powerless to stop something or change something.
And I think that's part of what he's feeling.
Well, yeah, that's
very unempowered. And then my younger son, my 14-year-old, he's very depressed right now. He hides in the computer games because mm-hmm. he can't interact. I mean, I try to pull him out of that. The other day he was lying in bed, just tears coming out of his eyes. Mm-hmm. And quiet, didn't say anything. He's just very sad. And it hurts me that my children have to go through that. And I don't understand. What can I do? Yeah.
And I mean, it's not just you. All kinds of parents are facing this, And I mean, what needs to happen is we need to get back to regular human life, which is interaction with other people.
Right.
And not by distance either. Yeah. Although that is important. I mean, like, here we are doing a Skype conversation, to be able to share this with other people. There is definitely a place for the wonders of technology and being able, like even 10 years ago, we weren't doing things like this, So, I mean, that is great. But I feel like you and I are sitting here feeling empowered.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of people who are not.
Right.
And so, exactly. How do you make that change? And in the life force arts method, right, the wheel, the first thing is being aware, sentience. The second thing is osmosis, which is, being able to be grounded in who you are and what you think and stand up for it. So it's empowerment, right? And the third thing is to interact and create something. And then the fourth thing is to go out and be able to do it and have a structure. So we are still, I think a lot of people in the world are still becoming aware of things.
Yeah.
And, like the recent buzzword has been, I'm getting woke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people are still waking up. They're still at like being aware of things that have been going on. And then the next thing is to take a stand. The next thing. And then after that is to be able to work creatively and cooperatively.
Right.
And then you have a new structure.
Right.
So many years ago, my guides told me, Joan, your work is for after the cataclysm. So you've heard me say that before now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm starting these podcasts and stuff like that, because now people are awake enough to see what I've been seeing for many years. Yeah. That kind of thing. So it's just a little bit out there. We're just the beginning of the cataclysm. Yeah. So, what to do about something like that? It's, one of the things about it, about the life force arts method, the wheel, it talks about, like this, the true self and the creative community. So part of life is understanding what is your essence. And actually our exhibit, each of the exhibits that we do, we're now on our 38th exhibit with about 175 different artists that have exhibited with us, including yourself. They're all based in the life force arts method. And so the show that we have up now, which this lovely triptych by Shauna Ora Knight is behind me, is about the soul's essence. Who are you? What is your skin? And we're doing a performance called Signet Soul, which is the swan, which is a symbol of the soul. And that's being very interesting to examine, because in some ways the swan in stories and ballets, Swan Lake, and this kind of thing, is a tragic figure. Although the one story is, of course, the ugly duckling, who reveals, his true self, and realizes that, the problem is that he's not a duckling, he's a swan. And if you look at yourself that way, you don't know who you are. How do you discover who you are? Yeah. And but often they're considered tragic, and they are very aligned. Like throughout history, people have told stories about humans becoming animals and animals becoming humans, right? Do you have some of your artwork around that's your animal? Like you had a, it's not handy, huh? The recent one that you did with the
cheetah?
Or any.
Where did I put it? Hang on a second.
Okay. Yeah.
I keep reorganizing my studio.
Of course. Yeah. But so there have been a lot of stories told about humans becoming animals and animals becoming humans. And
there we go.
There we go. Yeah, so that is what a finished piece of Sharon's artwork looks like. And that is all done with burning into the wood. So do you have any paint on that at all? No.
Not
you want to show that one more?
Yeah, I usually will add a little something when and if it feels right.
Yeah. So this is done with a little pen that is heated. It's like a special pyrography pen.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it's right here.
That's what that
This is
looks
one of
like.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Here's
And
another one. This is for the big backgrounds. So this is the big gun. Yeah.
I was going to say that part that is the dark part, like the upper right-hand corner as you're facing it, that takes like a million years, right?
Well, not quite that long, but it does take a little while.
Because to make it dark like that, it's like
it's just burning very, 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 very slowly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like right.
It's a very magical, and I've taught these classes, and I do teach online.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very magical process. I also paint in oils and acrylics and watercolor, but this has been my main medium because of the intensity of the fire and the actual physical process. It's physical as opposed to mechanical. And that's a real interesting it's an interesting change from when you go from drawing, where it's very mechanical, where that pen is going exactly where you take it. I mean, it's going to do what it's going to do only when you push it. Now with heat and with fire, you're working with the fire. Because if you put that pen down and you hesitate, it's going to burn. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very sensitive to the fire. You have to be sensitive to the ambient temperature in the room, because things change. If you are nervous, it'll reflect in your line. So that's one of the reasons why, with my health, I do suffer from depression. I've had episodes of suicidal intent and one unsuccessful attempt. That this is the one thing that will calm me down. It really shifts my awareness, because it reflects back to me that, combined with the smell, combined with the feeling, it's taking a very destructive force, the force of fire, and channeling it into something that's highly responsive and that can create beauty. I don't know how else to put it. And, I could talk endlessly about how I feel about burning, but until you're burning and you feel that smoothness come through and that incredible responsiveness and playing back and forth with that element that really is uncontrollable. Mm-hmm. It is, you don't control it, you work with it.
Right.
And of course, that's the element of the third phase of the wheel, the element of fire, because the life force wheel also has elements of the earth, air, fire, water. And that is fire. It is very transformative. And so I've gone off on a tangent.
No,
I love what I do. I just love the burning and the smell and the feel of it and the look of it. It's just nothing like it.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of thing that breaks us out of depression or breaks us out of feeling not empowered. Mm-hmm. When you're creating something that and working with something you really love.
Yeah.
And you feel like there's meaning in your life, like this kind of thing.
Even the patterns, that's one of the things I love about Mucha. The patterns that emerge, even in the hair, he has a tendency to create this masses of hair. You look in here, it's almost like there is no pattern. But then as you work with it, you notice that there is a pattern. So you begin to take this chaotic mess and create rhythms out of it. Things like this, it's almost meditative. I'll sit here and I'll burn and my mind empties out. This is my meditation.
Yes.
I've done meditation for a while there. I did a challenge where I was meditating an hour every day. And I guess it was enlightening, but it was nowhere near as much enjoyment as one of these. I'd rather burn for an hour.
Right.
But it empties the mind.
Yes.
And I just get absorbed into it. The smell of the burning wood is like incense. Of course, you have to be careful which wood you burn.
Yes.
Some of it will knock you out or make you very sick. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is, I think all the arts are like that.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is my spiritual practice.
Yes.
You know, and art, I guess, would be my church. If you want to think of it in that manner, art is my church, is because that is where I connect with the divine. You know, that's where my mind stills enough that I can listen, that I can feel, that I can perceive, that I can still myself down enough that I can begin to see the wisdom, and where I receive a lot of things I've received. You know that I've written a lot of things. I've got a very vast library of writings, and much of
Yes.
it's been shared through Life Force.
Mm-hmm.
I've received a lot of information in that manner. When I get myself to that point, that I can actually, that I'm prepared to receive. Because most of the time I'm not, you know, I'm distracted, I'm busy, my mind is filled with all the things of every day that we all have to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's also like when you say being in the flow or being connected to the divine. It's to me, I also think of it as, you know, being in exactly the right place and the right time. You know, doing exactly what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing is, you know, God. You know,
Yeah.
it's the divine, it's the goddess, it's the source, you know. And it's also grounding. I mean, I remember, I forgot on which journey I had heard this, you know, but they were saying, the guides were saying to me, like, um, your job is to get struck by lightning and survive, to me, right? And I've had people say, "Oh, Joan, you mean you were hit by lightning, Joan?" It's like, no, not literally, but how to ground, you know. And it's like when you think of a lightning rod, I mean, sometimes we use the word lightning rod to mean, oh, somebody who is in the middle of something, like all the anger and frustration and whatever that people are, you know, like feeling. A person becomes, or an issue or something becomes a lightning rod for that situation, which in some ways I think is what's going on with George Floyd. You know, there is just this pent up energy.
Yes.
And then there's the lightning rod, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, you know, like you might want to share some of the stuff that you've talked about, like with the Taliesin and Celtic spirituality that you have a connection to, and naming things. Like I realized that my name is she who gets hit by lightning and survives.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and that is a
Yeah.
really, I mean, that's not just a cutesy name for me.
No.
That
No.
really is an essential part of my identity, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. That was, in that I'm also a druid.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not a really great druid, but the teachings really do resonate, and I do have a lineage that is part Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
There's my family is Scottish, part Scottish. So yeah, I've studied druidry. I feel very much connection with poetry and the bardic tradition, which is the tradition of the arts. And one of the things that's really struck me is the communication that, when two bards would meet, they would introduce themselves and say, for example, like you said, I am the one who gets struck by lightning and survives. Now, who are you? And it would be this interplay of who are you, without saying, well, I'm Sharon Bechtold, and I live in Bartlett, Illinois, and I have 4 children, and blah blah blah, and I've been married for 36 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You don't describe yourself like that.
Mm-hmm.
You would describe yourself in a way that is a little deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Well,
and
yeah.
you've heard my responses are, I am the heartbeat of the forest. I am the whisper of the wind. I am the dance of the flame and the kiss of the raindrops. I am the voice that passes through all generations, the old and the new. Tell me, who are you? So, And that's been with me for many years. And, I thought, well, maybe I need to update it, but it just feels right.
Mm-hmm.
So I've stuck with it.
Yeah. It's the elements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Cool. Yeah. So how to encourage people, how to encourage people. The third part of the medicine wheel is also the healer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the healer and the phoenix. The phoenix is the one going through change and transformation, and the healer is the one that holds the container for change and process. And I like to say that the artist is an expert at making statements, and the healer is an expert at asking questions. So, because to ask questions, like you said, I am, you make your statement, and then you go, and who are you? You ask the question. That leads the person into thinking about who they are.
Yeah. And in a different way, instead of saying, I'm Sharon, who are you? And you would respond, well, I'm Joan. You wouldn't respond, I am the one who gets hit by lightning.
Right.
But if you tell me, I am the one who gets hit by lightning and I survive, who are you? Now that gives me an invitation. It gives me permission to think outside and to think, oh, I remember one person that I had a group on Facebook. One person responded, and I love her response. She said, I am a solitary social butterfly. And I thought, I love that. I love that because you can dive into that. I mean, the responses I got from people were, most of them were incredibly creative. And I looked at it and I'm like, I knew them better.
Yes.
I knew them better than all the stupid memes. Although I still love my cat videos.
Cat memes.
But my cat memes, they're very much a part of me. But yeah, wow. That poetry was so powerful. That's something else that I would love to see, original poetry. Music. How do we express what is happening right now? And express it in a way that is visceral, and in a way that we can look at it and we can study it. Because we can't look and study necessarily everything, but that's one of the beautiful things about art is you can do it and then you can study it, you can learn it, you can examine it. You can say, what's really happening here? How do I feel about this? What do I like? What do I dislike? Why do I like it? Why do I dislike it? When I do critiques for students or critiques on art, that's what I do. I look at it and say, this works, this doesn't. What was happening here? Am I misunderstanding this? And, it gives you a chance to step away from the heat of what it is and stand apart and say, what do I think about this? I think that's really powerful and important.
Right.
Music. How do we feel about these chords and these notes? Do they mesh together? Are they discordant? Are they supposed to be discordant? I've been listening a lot to Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. And it's got some very discordant notes in it. And it works because it puts out that feeling. It's an emotion that's being expressed, and it works. And I listen to that and I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel. It's given expression to that feeling, that emotion. Same thing with movement, with dance. Certain movements will help you express some of that. How am I moving right now in response to everything?
Yes.
Another thing I really love about art is the movement. When I burn, I move my body. Sometimes I'll stand up. What does it take to create a circle like this? This is done freehand. That's done freehand. The lines are done freehand. They're not done with my wrist. They're done with my entire arm. They're done with my entire body. It's a very kinesthetic thing.
Yes.
You don't always think about that, but it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't even know where I was going with this conversation.
Well, I mean,
And it took
of course, There, one thing in the on the wheel, there's like the witness and the artist,
Yes.
right? And so the witness is the first, in some ways, the first step of the wheel, and it's about just being aware, just being conscious, right? Sentience, like as in sentient being, means a being that is alive, feeling, and conscious. And it's very interesting. I had started off the company in 1988 with the name of the company and the corporation was Sentience Inc. And then I changed it 10 years, 11 years later to Life Force Arts or Life Force Ensemble, and then Life Force Arts Ensemble. The now the word, and at that time, one of the reasons I changed it was because people were forever misspelling that word. Sentence, sentinel, whatever. Sentience, now they're talking about artificial intelligence, and they're talking about making robots sentient and all of this. And it's like, no, circle with a big line through it. We're not even using our own natural intelligence and consciousness. We're trying to, it's like modern life and society is about dulling all of our consciousness and only saying, well, you can only move in these forms. And boy, that's really coming out with,
Yes,
there's this law and that law, and you have to stay at home, and you have to, like, well, these people are looting, so everybody has to stay at home, which I'm not saying, I mean, I understand the purpose of that,
right.
Because the wheel is all of it. The wheel is also crystallized forms. It's like, what do you do as law enforcement when you've got a dangerous situation on your hands? I mean, but it's like, and then there are the laws. There are things like, the Bill of Rights and that kind of stuff. Like, why do we have freedom of speech? Why do we have freedom of religion? Why do we have freedom of the press? Why do we have freedom of assembly? Because without those, we get lost as human beings. I mean, those are basic, basic rights. Without those, our freedoms are taken from us.
Right.
That kind of stuff. So, when I went to the master's program at DePaul School for New Learning, one of the things that they asked us, something like, I have to look it up, but something like, what is your life? What are themes in your life? Or what is the theme of your life or something? And I said, freedom, ecstasy, peace, and resurrection. So freedom is giving people freedom is a big deal for me. And it's like, with that, with permission to be yourself, with permission to be your soul's essence, and the second show for this year at Life Force is called The Soul's Home. And that's the creative community that the true self can really express itself in, right? Because there's been a lot in recent years about, finding yourself and, finding your essence and understanding your talents and your gifts and, all of this. But if you have a society that's not accepting it and giving you no place to do it, it's hard to do it.
Yes.
And to me, that is the biggest awakening. That's the next awakening that really has to happen for people. It's like, how do you find the place that you can do your mission? How do you find the place and the tribe and the
environment?
The environment.
Yeah.
It's not to say that you should just give up. Oh, well, I have all these talents, but I don't have any place to go. Oh, well, that's it. My life is over. I mean, that's when you start to feel not empowered.
Right.
That's a statement of being not empowered. But it's not always easy, but some people don't even look for it. Some people go round and round in their head. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had people, me teaching like how they can connect to the other world and the spirit guides and intuition and all of this. And they say, I've always done this, but my family thinks it's evil. Or, my family thinks it's stupid and it's not real and I'm crazy. And when is my family going to understand that? And I say to them, your family may never understand you. You may need to have a different tribe.
Yeah.
Than the people you grew up around. But and of course that becomes the sticking point. Like, do you keep yourself, do you try to fit in? Do you try to fit in for the sake of peace, for the sake of not being killed, for the sake of, whatever? Or can we break out of that to a place that you can really flourish?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we all want to belong. We all do want to belong.
Absolutely. Because it's normal.
Yes. And it's about creating an environment
Yeah.
that can accept people that are different.
Yes.
Or can accept people that want a different expression and give them that container and some form of structure so that we can all flourish.
Exactly. Because in some ways, how do you put this? The word different. It's not that a person is different. It's that a person has a different kind of talent.
Yes.
That is useful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not being useful. The people you're with right now don't see that what your talent is as being useful. Right. So you got to go where that talent is useful. Also, no profession, no practice, no art form develops without shop talk.
Yeah.
You got to be with people who are your peers, and then you start talking about the things, and then that's the dialogue part of the wheel. Where it's not just about one person teaching another person or sharing what they do. It's about, okay, you get together and then you create something because you're coming at it from a place of expertise of,
yes,
how do you all work together to create something?
Mm-hmm.
So these are all ways of breaking out of, the dilemma that we're in. And, all of these things are time honored. This is human. This is not a big discovery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just bringing our consciousness to know that this is what our goal is. Yeah. What is the problem and what is the goal, And what are the retro learning? That's another one that I learned from DePaul School for New Learning. Proto learning is designing a course of study for yourself, like say to learn, or somebody else designs it for you, to learn something you don't know. And retro learning is you encounter a problem that you need to solve and that you haven't encountered before, and you say to yourself, what have I learned in the past that will help me solve this problem? And that is why, like you were saying about the ancestors, mm-hmm. and all the different ways that we're connected into people from the past that have the knowledge of how to solve the problems we're having today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably about time to wrap this up. Crazy how it's easy. It's so easy to talk. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as one of my first guests, because we always have these wonderful conversations and we never record them.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.